What up, fight world, and what up, hip-hop? Something is very wrong with the picture Claressa Shields has been painting for months, and it just got worse in the most public way possible. The woman who told you she was single, who told you Papoose filed for divorce because he was serious about her, who told you 2027 was going to be her baby year with a man she keeps calling hers. That woman is now watching from the sidelines while the actual wife, the legal wife, the woman whose name is still on that marriage certificate, stands in front of a live crowd at Angie Martinez's barbecue and calmly explains to a room full of witnesses that the reason the paperwork is not signed is because Papoose is asking for half of her money. Half of Remy Ma's money. And Remy said it with the coldness of a woman who has already made up her mind, with the timing of a woman who knew exactly where the cameras were, and with a beat drop behind her that turned the whole moment into a receipt she will be able to play back for the rest of her career. Everything you have been watching about this Claressa Shields situation has been framed around the wrong question. You have been arguing about whether she is the side chick or the main chick. That is the surface argument. That is the argument they want you stuck in. The real question, the one nobody in the boxing press has been willing to ask out loud, is why a two-time undisputed champion of the world with generational earnings on the way is publicly attached to a man whose own legal wife just went on record saying he is trying to get half of somebody else's bag. There are two timelines running at the same time right now. The one Claressa keeps telling you about, the black love, the gold love, the 2027 baby, the man who chose her, and the one Remy Ma just made undeniable. The timeline where the divorce cannot close because the price tag on it is half of a woman's life work. And I promise you, before we are done today, when we get to the network breakdown, when we get to the Connect audit, when we get to why 50 Cent, Fat Joe, Cardi, Angie Martinez, and Rihanna are all standing on one side of this and nobody with real weight is standing on the other, you're going to understand that this was never a love triangle. This was a business play that got exposed on a stage in Harlem with a French Montana feature in the background. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Let me set the whole board for you, because if you are new to this, or if you have only been catching pieces of it on your timeline, the full picture is way uglier than the highlights make it look. Claressa Shields is arguably the greatest female boxer of this era. Two-time undisputed at multiple weight classes, an Olympic gold medalist, a woman who has done every single thing you are supposed to do inside the ropes to build a legacy and a fortune. That is the resume. That is not up for debate. Papoose is a New York rapper, longtime Remy Ma partner, formerly celebrated as one half of what a whole generation of hip-hop fans called Black Love. He held Remy down through her prison bid. That is the story he tells. That is the story that got sold on love and hip-hop for years. And that is the story he built his whole public identity on. Remy Ma is the Bronx legend, the Terror Squad veteran, the woman who came home from her sentence, rebuilt her career from scratch, went bar for bar with Nicki Minaj and lived to talk about it, and has spent the last 2 years quietly becoming one of the most well-networked figures in New York hip-hop again. That is your cast. That is who you are dealing with. Now here is where the stakes explode. Somewhere in the last stretch of time, the Papoose and Remy marriage stopped being a marriage in the everyday sense, and Papoose surfaced connected to Claressa Shields. Claressa did not treat it like a rumor. Claressa treated it like a coronation. She started doing interviews acting like the wife had already been dismissed, calling it Black Love, then when that got clowned, rebranding it as Gold Love with the wildest analogy any of us have ever heard about washing machines and gold bricks. She started talking about 2027 baby plans on camera with a straight face. She started making cryptic posts about bees and ops teaming up, aimed squarely at black women who were laughing at her online. And through all of that, one thing kept not happening. The divorce. It never closed. It never finalized. It never went through. And every time somebody in an interview would gently press her on that timeline, does Papoose know about the baby? Is the paperwork done? Is he actually your man? She would either dodge, get visibly annoyed, or fire off another cryptic post. Meanwhile, on the other side of the country, Remy Ma was not doing any of that. Remy was working. Remy was performing with French Montana. Remy was sitting down with Angie Martinez. Remy was riding on the Knicks parade float with Fat Joe. Remy was doing interviews with Spike Lee, one of the most important black filmmakers alive. And the whole time, Remy did not have to say a word about the marriage, because her silence was doing more damage to Claressa's narrative than any diss ever could. And then, at Angie's barbecue, Remy stopped being silent. And the question we all have to sit with now is the question you already know is coming. If a man is really leaving a marriage because he found real love, why is that marriage still open? And why does the person still legally attached to him say the reason it is still open is that he wants half? So let us get into the actual receipts, because this is not vibes, this is not gossip, this is stuff that happened in front of cameras and microphones with witnesses in the room. The first piece of surface evidence is the barbecue itself. Angie Martinez, a woman whose reputation in New York radio goes back to the point where she is literally on the intro of a Tupac song from the mid-90s, decided to throw a barbecue and put Remy Ma on that stage. That alone is a signal. Angie Martinez does not casually co-sign people. Angie Martinez has spent 30 years building a filter for who she associates with, and the filter said Remy. And on that stage, in front of that crowd, with a live beat behind her, Remy opened the moment with what can only be described as a female 50 Cent style cold intro. I'll be single when these ninjas stop asking for half. But that's between me and y'all. That is the quote. That is the sentence. That is the tape. Play it back, play it in slow motion, play it in the club, play it in your car. She said it with a smile, she said it with a beat behind her, and the crowd caught it in real time. That is piece 1. Piece 2 is the diss record. Remy altered the lyrics of what everyone in the culture had already labeled the Papoose and Claressa record, and this time she inserted Papoose's name directly. No more subliminal, no more plausible deniability. She said, and I quote, "You always acting like you helping Pap, help yourself." That is not a subliminal. That is a name drop on a beat with a barbecue full of witnesses. If you have ever wondered what it looks like when a woman decides she is done pretending to be diplomatic, watch that clip. Piece 3 is the release strategy around the moment. Remy did not just drop this randomly. She did it after doing an Angie Martinez interview. She did it in the same window she was on stage with French Montana and Max B, a legendary Harlem duo, both of whom have their own connection to the boroughs and the streets, both of whom chose to share that stage with her and not with Papoose. That is the third piece of surface evidence, and it is a piece a lot of casual fans are going to miss. When French Montana and Max B decide the BX joint they are performing needs a Bronx female voice on it, and their phone dials Remy and not any of the other women available to them. That is a cultural signal that the industry has already picked a side in this thing. Piece 4 is what Claressa herself has been doing on camera in the exact same window. She has been going into interviews and getting visibly rattled the moment anyone asks her a real question. That Fight Camp interview where she casually said she was having a baby in 2027 with Pap, and the interviewer, to her credit, actually asked the follow-up question, "Does Pap know?" and Claressa's face changed. That happened. That is on tape. And then there is the Ariel Helwani sit-down, where she got asked a light question about female rappers, and when Remy Ma's name came up, Claressa's whole demeanor shifted. She took a sip of water. She got quiet. She told Ariel he went too far. Ariel. Not the black women online. Not the fans who were clowning the gold love speech. Ariel. She saved the smoke for one crowd and the deference for another, and the internet clocked it. That is not a subtle piece of evidence. That is a public tell, and the audience saw it in real time. And when you line up those 4 pieces, the barbecue, the diss, the cosigns from the culture, and Claressa's own visible discomfort, you are not looking at a story where 2 sides have equal credibility. You are looking at a story where one side is confidently making music about it, and the other side is trying not to cry on camera when a reporter mentions the other woman's name. And I want you to hold on to that image, because we are just getting to the surface. The deeper you go, the worse it gets for the couple that keeps telling you they are winning. And oh, do I have more for you? Because if you thought the barbecue and the diss record and the interview meltdown were the ceiling of this thing, you are not ready for what the culture around them has been quietly saying. The stans of the gold love couple are really not going to want to hear this next stretch. Because the truth is, what Remy said on that stage did not exist in a vacuum. There is an entire ecosystem of hip-hop legends, radio veterans, and cultural gatekeepers who have been telling you where they stand for months. And most of you have been so busy arguing on Twitter about whether Claressa is a homewrecker that you missed the actual verdict being handed down by the people whose opinion in this culture is the only opinion that has ever mattered. So let me walk you through who is standing where, and by the time we get to the end of this stretch, you're going to see that this is not a two-sided fight. This is one side with the culture and one side standing in a hallway by itself. Start with Fat Joe. Fat Joe is not a neutral party in this. Fat Joe is Terror Squad. Fat Joe is Remy Ma's mentor going back to before most of her current fans could read. Fat Joe is currently on Netflix, currently running a podcast with Jadakiss, currently in every serious New York cultural conversation. And Fat Joe has not moved a muscle to co-sign Papoose in any of this. He has not appeared at events with him. He has not defended him in any interview. He has not thrown him a lifeline. Silence from a man that powerful is a message. That is piece 1 of the cultural evidence. Piece 2 is Angie Martinez, and I already told you what her barbecue looked like, but I want you to understand what her interview with Remy looked like, because it was not a light and friendly hip-hop chat. It was a full-length sit-down where Remy told a story about being at a Knicks game and Rihanna herself walking over and telling Remy that she loved her. Rihanna, the most famous woman in music right now. The woman whose approval literally moves markets. Rihanna is not out here co-signing any part of the Claressa and Papoose narrative. Rihanna picked a side by picking a hug. And A$AP Rocky was standing right there when it happened. That is piece 2, and if you think that is a small thing, you have not been paying attention to how celebrity endorsement actually works in this culture. Piece 3 is Cardi B. Cardi and Remy have had a long-standing working friendship. Cardi is the biggest female rapper of this generation commercially. And Cardi has been quietly firm on where she stands. She has not posted a single thing that could be interpreted as support for the Claressa side of this. Not one. In a world where Cardi comments on everything, that silence toward one party and warmth toward the other is loud. Piece 4 is 50 Cent, and this one is maybe the most telling. 50 Cent famously squashes and reignites beefs at his own pace. 50 recently squashed things with Fat Joe and with Jadakiss, meaning he is repairing his New York relationships one by one. But 50 has an ongoing tension with Papoose that has not been repaired. And 50 has publicly signaled that he messes with Remy. So the same man who is out here mending fences with everybody else in New York has decided that Papoose is the one exception. That tells you exactly how Papoose is perceived by the culture's most calculating power broker. And now I know some of you Papoose defenders are going to say, well, none of that means the marriage side of this is dead. None of that means Claressa is wrong. That is just industry politics. And I hear you. I want to acknowledge that argument because it is a fair one on its face. But here is the problem with it. The industry politics only cut this cleanly in one direction when the person on the losing side has made themselves impossible to defend. Papoose has been in this industry for over 20 years. If he had built strong relationships, if he had held real cultural weight, if the people who matter believed in his version of the story, at least one of them would have said something. And not one of them has. That silence is the argument. That silence is the evidence. That silence is Remy's whole case being made for her by the biggest names in the room. And now, on top of that, you have Spike Lee. Spike Lee sat down with Remy for a full interview. Spike Lee, the man who directed Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing. The man whose stamp of cultural approval is essentially a doctorate from the University of Black Cinema. Spike Lee looked at the two people in this triangle and picked the one he wanted to spend an afternoon in conversation with. And you already know which one that was. So when you add all of that up, Fat Joe's silence, Angie Martinez's barbecue, Rihanna's love, A$AP's proximity, Cardi's tacit alignment, 50 Cent's selective peace, and Spike Lee's cultural cosign, you are not looking at a rumor. You are looking at a verdict. The culture has already voted, and the vote is not close. And here is where the whole thing takes a hard turn, because up until this point we have been talking about relationships and reactions and receipts. We are done with that. We are about to talk about the machine underneath all of this, and once you see the machine, you cannot unsee it. Because here is what nobody in the fight world is talking about, and here is what nobody in the culture world wants to say out loud. What you are actually watching is not a love story. What you are actually watching is a business collision, and the business is not even close. Let me break this down across 3 separate layers, because this is where the story stops being about who is dating who and starts being about who structured their life to survive without the other, and who did not. Layer 1 is the earnings architecture. Claressa Shields, as I said at the top, is one of the highest profile female boxers on the planet. Undisputed at multiple weight classes. A woman whose fight purses, endorsements, and PPV cuts are on a trajectory that puts her in a bracket most rappers of Papoose's era never touched. Remy Ma, on her side of the equation, has spent the last several years diversifying. She has her own network project. She has hosted television. She has a real, functioning touring schedule right now. She has residual income from a long-running reality television footprint. She is publishing on catalog music that never stopped generating. So we have two women, both of whom have built their own bag independently, and one man in the middle who, according to his own reported public numbers, does not have a comparable independent bag to either of them. That is not a shot. That is a spreadsheet. And when you look at a spreadsheet like that, the fact that the marriage is not finalized starts to look less like a love holdout and more like a leverage position. Because what Remy said on that stage, "I will be single when these ninjas stop asking for half," is not an emotional statement. That is a negotiation statement. That is a statement made by a woman whose lawyer has told her exactly what is on the table and who has decided the number is a no. Layer 2 is the media narrative infrastructure. And this is the layer that separates a real analysis of this from a gossip take. Consider what has happened to the Papoose brand over the last 2 years. He used to be marketed as the Black Love Standard. He used to be sold as the loyal rapper who moved states to be near his incarcerated queen. That was the brand. That brand collapsed the moment he attached himself to Claressa, and the rebranding attempt, the gold love pivot with the washing machine analogy, was one of the least successful public relations maneuvers this culture has seen in years. Now here is the systemic point. When a public figure loses a brand identity, they do not just lose fans. They lose their placement in the media rotation. They lose the phone calls. They lose the interview requests. They lose the podcast bookings. They lose the freestyle invites. And if you look at what has happened since that rebrand attempt, you will notice that Papoose's media footprint has not expanded. Remy's has. That is not an accident. That is the media ecosystem doing what the media ecosystem always does, which is quietly reallocating attention toward whoever is generating the cleaner narrative and quietly withdrawing it from whoever is generating the messier one. Remy's narrative right now is winner, worker, veteran, cultural icon. That is a greenlit narrative. Everyone wants a piece of it. Papoose's narrative right now, fairly or not, is the man reportedly holding up his own divorce over a number. That is a red-lit narrative. Nobody wants to platform it, because platforming it means having to ask him a question that gets him defensive on camera. And so the reallocation happens in silence. Layer 3, and this is the deepest layer, is the historical pattern. This culture has seen this movie before. It has seen the Kendu Isaacs and Mary J. Blige version of this movie. It has seen the Brittany Renner and PJ Washington version of it. It has seen the Dree Michelle and Jalen Green version. It has seen the Iman Shumpert and Teyana Taylor conversations. In almost every version of this movie you can name from the last decade, the higher-earning partner is the one being asked to give up a piece of what they built, and the culture, correctly or not, tends to side against whoever is asking. What is different about the current situation is that the person allegedly asking for the split, according to what Remy said out loud on that stage, is a hip-hop veteran whose entire public identity was built on the concept of loyalty, sacrifice, and holding his woman down. That is a devastating positional shift. Because it means the brand and the alleged behavior are not just misaligned. They are inverted. And when the brand and the alleged behavior are inverted, the culture does not just walk away from you. The culture starts using you as a cautionary tale, which is exactly what is happening right now on every timeline you scroll through. Now put those 3 layers together. The earnings architecture that says he does not have his own bag. The media infrastructure that has already started reallocating attention away from him. And the historical pattern that says the culture will always side against the person perceived to be reaching for someone else's money. That is not a love triangle. That is a slow-motion career reckoning being carried out in public, with Claressa Shields, one of the greatest female fighters alive, tied to the ankle of it. And she does not seem to realize that when the reckoning finishes, it does not just take him. It takes her too. So here is the truth bomb, and I want you to sit with this one, because this is the sentence the whole video has been building to. The reason the Papoose and Remy Ma marriage has not been dissolved, according to what Remy Ma herself said in front of an audience with a working microphone and a live beat behind her, is because Papoose is reportedly asking for half of Remy Ma's assets. Half. And Remy has decided the answer is no, and she is willing to stay legally married for as long as it takes to make that answer stick. Now let me tell you why this detonates every single thing Claressa Shields has been telling you for months. Claressa's entire narrative depended on one specific assumption. The assumption was that Papoose was moving toward her because he loved her, because he chose her, because she was the future and Remy was the past. That was the story. That was the frame. That was the whole PR play. If that story were true, then the paperwork would be the easiest step in the entire process. A man who has genuinely chosen a new life does not fight over a number on the way out of the old one. A man who has genuinely chosen a new life signs the papers, walks away with what is legally clean, and goes to build with the person he actually wants to build with. That is what a real transition looks like. What Remy just described in public is not a real transition. What Remy just described in public is a man reportedly using the marriage as leverage to extract a settlement, which means the marriage is not being held open by love, it is being held open by a price tag. And here is the part that should make Claressa Shields sit down and rethink every interview she has done for the last calendar year. If Papoose is reportedly willing to extract that kind of settlement from a woman he was publicly branded as loving for over a decade, a woman whose incarceration he supposedly built his whole persona around standing by, then what exactly is the ceiling of what he might do to a woman he has known for a fraction of that time? That is not a question I am asking rhetorically. That is a question the evidence is asking on Claressa's behalf, whether she is ready to answer it or not. And I know some of you are going to say, well, this is only allegedly, this is only what Remy said, this is only one side. And you are correct on the letter of it. This is Remy's statement. Papoose has not, as of this moment, offered a detailed public counter that changes the shape of it. But here is the thing. Even if you throw out the specific number, even if you throw out the specific word half, the underlying situation is undeniable. The paperwork is not signed. The divorce is not closed. The legal marriage is intact. And the woman who is legally married has publicly stated the reason it is intact is that the man is asking for money she is not willing to give. That framework, all by itself, without any embellishment, is fatal to the Claressa version of the story. Because in the Claressa version of the story, Papoose is a man in love. In the actual documented reality, Papoose is a man in a negotiation. Those are not the same man. And every day that goes by without that paperwork being signed is another day the actual documented reality gets louder and the Claressa version gets quieter. This is the reveal. This is the receipt. This is the reason every joke about gold love, every clown moment in every interview, every cryptic bees and ops post from Claressa's account was actually orbiting around a truth she was refusing to name. Papoose was not choosing her. Papoose was, according to his own legal wife, trying to price out the exit. And once you see that, you cannot see anything else about this story the same way ever again. But here is the thing about stories like this. The truth always finds a way, and the person who did the right work always ends up in the right position. Remy Ma is not asking for anybody's sympathy right now. Remy Ma is on stage. Remy Ma is on radio. Remy Ma is riding parade floats with the Knicks. Remy Ma is being embraced by Rihanna at basketball games. Remy Ma is sitting across from Spike Lee. Remy Ma is remixing records with French Montana and Max B. Remy Ma came home from a prison bid with less than she went in with. Watched her partner reportedly gamble and pawn her belongings during her incarceration according to her own past public statements, and instead of collapsing under any of that, she went back to work. She rebuilt. She toured. She reinvented. She locked in. And now, in the middle of all of that renewal, the same partner is reportedly asking her for half of what she rebuilt with her own two hands, after he was supposed to be the one holding it down. And her answer, delivered on stage, with a smile, with a beat, with a barbecue full of witnesses, is the answer that anybody who has ever rebuilt anything from the ground up would give. No. And that no is the point of this entire story. Because the moral of this whole situation is not really about who is dating who. The moral is about what happens when you build your own thing on your own terms with your own hands. When you do that, nobody can take it from you. Not a divorce filing. Not a settlement demand. Not a public relations campaign. Not a rebrand from black love to gold love. Not a cryptic Instagram post about bees. Not a fight camp interview where you announce a 2027 baby with a man whose paperwork is not even signed. None of that touches the person who did the actual work. Meanwhile, on the other side of the story is Claressa Shields, a woman who did the work in the ring, but who is watching her out-of-ring reputation take punches she does not know how to slip. And here is the contrast one-liner that sums this whole thing up. One woman built her career, went to prison, came home, and rebuilt it again with her own hands, and the culture is throwing her parades for it. The other woman built her career, is still at the top of it, and is spending her prime defending a relationship the culture is refusing to validate. That is the whole story in one sentence. And it is why, when the dust settles on all of this, Remy Ma is going to be fine. Remy Ma was already fine before any of this went public, and she is going to be more than fine after it fades. The real question is what happens to Claressa. Because Claressa still has a boxing career to protect. Claressa still has fights on the calendar. Claressa still has endorsement conversations to have. And every day she stays tied to this narrative, the harder those conversations get. But even that, honestly, is fixable. Because the truth is, Claressa is still one of the best boxers alive, and if she ever decides to step away from the noise and get back to being what she actually is, the ring will still be there for her. The ring does not care about gold love. The ring does not care about washing machines. The ring only cares about who shows up ready to work. And in that sense, both women in this story have something in common. They both know how to work. The only difference is that one of them figured out a long time ago that the work is the only thing that saves you. Now this is only the start, and I am telling you that not as a tease, but as a promise. Two things are about to happen in this story, and I want you subscribed for both of them. Number 1, the paperwork situation is not going away. Remy Ma just publicly signaled that she is prepared to sit in this legal marriage for as long as it takes to get the number right, and Papoose now has a decision to make in public, on the record, with the whole culture watching, about whether he wants to walk away clean or keep fighting for a settlement that just got dragged into a barbecue clip that is going to live on the internet forever. Whatever he chooses, that story is going to move again, and when it does, you want to be here for the breakdown. Number 2, Claressa Shields has a fight camp to run, and there is no version of the near future where the questions in her press availabilities do not include the words Remy Ma. Every interviewer who books her from now until her next bout is going to have that clip in their notes, and Claressa is going to have to decide whether she keeps ducking the question or whether she finally addresses it head-on. Both choices carry consequences, and both choices produce a story worth covering. So make sure you are locked in, hit the subscribe button if you have not already, and if you have made it this far in the video, you are honestly the reason this channel keeps going. Y'all are amazing. Now, before you click out, the next thing you need to watch is sitting right there, because there is a bigger conversation happening under all of this about which women in hip-hop actually run their own bags, and which ones only look like they do. And there is one specific name in that conversation, a name you would not expect, whose paperwork situation makes the Remy and Papoose story look like a warm-up. When we get to the label ownership breakdown in that video, you are going to understand why the entire hierarchy of who we call rich in this culture has been mislabeled for years. Click it now. I will see you there.